Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I'm the news editor for The Cradle, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for The Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for The Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. And before we start, as usual, please, we ask you to leave a like, to share this video, to subscribe to our channel, to find us on our other social media platforms, and to, above all, check out our Patreon, where you can become a direct supporter of The Cradle. So today, as we start, threats of war continue to escalate from all sides under the context of the U.S. and Iran nuclear talks, and of course, with Israel and its attempts to derail all of this. Before recording this episode, the IAEA Board of Governors, in its latest report, accuses Iran of non-compliance with its obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty for nuclear weapons, and essentially opening the door for what could be EU snapback sanctions and further escalations, despite the fact that Oman has confirmed that U.S. nuclear talks are going to continue this weekend. At the same time, we have the Pentagon issuing its highest alert level for Iraq and starting to evacuate or remove some of its official embassy staff from the Iraqi capital amid reports that Israel is ready for an attack, an all-out attack against Iran. At the same time, yesterday, the Islamic Republic reminds the United States that if these threats continue, all of its U.S. bases are within range and can be attacked. So many questions truly here about what exactly is happening. Is this just a push and pull as part of the negotiations? The United States using Israel as kind of its attack dog in a way to try to get the Iranians to agree to the last U.S. proposal, which they called unacceptable. The Iranians yet to provide their next their own proposal, their counter proposal, and also the IAEA again acting as this kind of agent of instability, as also something we're going to touch on in a few minutes before we have this first discussion here, is the documents that Iran has alleged to have taken. Top secret documents from the Israeli nuclear program, among other things that they started to release today. But before we get into that, I want to get your thoughts on this, seemingly endless escalation. Are we really creeping towards an all-out war?
It's very hard to say because this kind of climate is something we've seen multiple times before when there's a confrontation or conflict between a number of parties. Everyone pulls out their leverage card to pressure their adversary into a concession. This happens through war. It happens through diplomacy too. And it happens through maneuvers. So, both sides know the other one is watching via satellites and other surveillance methods the military movements of their enemy. And so they move their things sometimes to give a sense that war could be in the offing. It's always this leverage game gets very hard and very vicious during a confrontation. And we wrote about that just this week. Iran's leverage at the table versus the US's leverage at the table, and the games they play. They actually escalate against each other during negotiations in order to get the other to concede. In this case, we're seeing a lot of moves by the U.S. Now, the IAEA Board of Governors resolution, what they voted for was a motion drafted by the U.S., Britain, France, and Germany, and won by a small margin of 19 votes in favor out of 35 in total. Now, Iran has complied with everything the IAEA has ever suggested to the Islamic Republic. We have over 100 quarterly reports from the IAEA showing Iran's compliance and making clear that in their investigations during each quarter's report, Iran has shown no indication of movement from a civilian nuclear program to a military one. There's over 100 of these reports. And the Iranians said in a joint statement today, they said, this is the Iranian Foreign Ministry and the AEOI, which is the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran. They said these actions by the four countries have seriously undermined the credibility and integrity of the IAEA. and further revealed the agency's political character. I mention this because we're going to talk about the Iranian document leaks shortly, and the first tranche of leaks that has been exposed by Iranian media is actually on the IAEA and its Director General Rafael Grossi. We'll get to that in a minute. So Iran immediately came out to this unbelievable provocation by obviously Western states, saying that we are going to now establish a new enrichment center in response to this, okay? Because there's no option, they say this, there's no option but to respond to this political resolution. Other Iranian media said that advanced centrifuges will now replace the older first generation centrifuges at the Fordow nuclear site, and further measures are being planned. The spokesman for Iran's Atomic Energy Organization says, we will launch the third enrichment complex and upgrade the first generation enrichment machines to the sixth generation. So that means enrichment will increase dramatically. What did the Western countries get from this extra piece of leverage they had? They got Iran to enrich further, which is legal. Okay, Iran has the right to enrichment. It doesn't, under the non-proliferation treaty, have the right to weaponize. Okay, and Trump's latest statement, and we should play a video clip of this, basically says that I will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Iran doesn't want a nuclear weapon. It's been saying that for decades, right? Good on you, Trump. I will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. We agree. Let's sign the paper right now.
Could you provide an update on Iran? We're hearing reports that U.S. personnel are being moved out of the region within striking distance.
Well, they are being moved out because it could be a dangerous place, and we'll see what happens. But they are being, we've given notice to move out, and we'll see what happens.
Is there anything that could be done to dial the temperature down in the region?
They can't have a nuclear weapon. Very simple. They can't have a nuclear weapon. We're not going to allow that.
Remember Arachi's quote when he said, no enrichment, no deal, no nuclear weapons, yes deal.
Yes, correct. Iran's like laughing at this stuff. I don't know that Trump knows the difference between enrichment and a nuclear weapon, because he's been saying no enrichment whatsoever in Iran. And today he said no nuclear weapon in Iran. They're completely different things. There's civilian nuclear programs in which you create energy, you create radioactive materials for diagnostic medicines and chemotherapies. You use it for countless things. Iran's using agriculture and industry, etc., which we discussed on an earlier podcast, because Karim and I actually had a chance to go with a bunch of international journalists to Tehran's nuclear reactor, okay, and got to see some of the byproducts of enrichment. Trump doesn't seem to know the difference. That's something that is becoming plainer to me, because he interchanges those terms, no to nuclear enrichment and then no to nuclear weapons. Iran's absolutely fine with the latter and just not the former. Now, as you can see, the sides are escalating, okay, through measures, through words. And at the same time, the Omani foreign minister just confirmed that the sixth round of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks will be held this Sunday in Muscat, which is why y'all should read the Cradle's article today. It's like how incredibly escalatory negotiations can be. And this is just both sides employing whatever leverage they have in order to get concessions from the other. But here's the thing, and I really want to point this out to all viewers. No way, no how will Iran stop its civilian nuclear program and its ability to enrich. It is something that the vast majority of Iranians, who differ on countless things, agree on. Number one. Number two, there's nothing wrong with this. Iran's been sanctioned left, right, and center. It has a program that is allowing it to create energy. Iran has electricity shortages too, and energy shortages. And they can't get the industrial equipment for the kind of drilling they need, for the kind of extraction they need for their energy, for their the refining process, etc. The Americans are trying to stop them from, from extraction levels of their energy resources to sale and transfer of these things. So of course you're going to have an indigenous energy program, as we discussed in a earlier podcast. Iran's goal within a decade or two is to have 20% of the country's energy from nuclear, the nuclear enrichment process. So Iran's never going to give it up. Trump comes across as an arrogant, entitled super brat who just thinks he can tell an entire country, not a person, a country, that they can't do something that is actually fine and legal, and expecting them to capitulate. He is learning that they're not, he will learn. He hasn't learned yet, clearly. They will not capitulate. Iran will now match action by action, measure by measure. Mark our words here. They are not going to let this go. And of course, the Iranians know that the Persian Gulf states that have, they've had sort of on and off adversarial relationships with, sometimes very badly so, and who were 10 years ago absolutely against an Iran-US nuclear agreement, are now pushing for this nuclear agreement, agreeing, telling the US that one has to be done so this business is all finished and put behind us so we can move towards peaceful development. These Gulf Arab states do not want a war. So now, if the Americans are stupid enough to launch a war in Iran, they will have to realize, and I don't think Trump gets this, that they will trigger a huge process of actions and reactions that once let out of the box can't be put back in the box. They're at a place where there's a lot of levers right now. Okay, they can pull and push, as you were saying, Esteban, and maybe with some mediation by the Russians, Putin directly when he goes to Iran shortly, etc. Arab Gulf countries talking between Trump and the Iranians, something can be done. Once you allow the military to open Pandora's box, there's no backstepping from there. There's just none. And of course, by the way, I think the U.S. Embassy, not closures, but asking staff to go home or giving them voluntary, it's scene setting, to make their Iranian adversary worried about what this means. It's not just the State Department that's done this. The Pentagon has also told military personnel that they have a right to voluntary departure, which makes zero sense because won't they need military personnel if there's a war? They're not going to send them away from the front lines, are they?
It's the world's deadliest game of chicken, what we're seeing then.
Yeah. And Iran's defense minister came out yesterday and said, we're going to attack U.S. military assets in the region in response to any attack, quote unquote, without hesitation. Now, of course, many here at the Cradle will say, you mean like True Promise 3? But I don't know. I think this is a whole different level. If the Israelis and the Americans, or both, launch any kind of military strike on Iran, Iran is prepared. And how do we know they're prepared? Well, they're kind of telling us. They're telling us because they've let loose, or are about to let loose, tens of thousands of leaked documents that, although announced just last week, I suspect they've had for quite a while, because we're already getting like very detailed things on their first cache that they've decided to release for obviously propaganda purposes because it suits the timing now. And I'm sorry, you can't comb through tens of thousands of documents and videos, etc., in such a short period and pull out the right one you need on this day. And the one they've pulled out on this day is the one on Rafael Grossi, the IAEA Director General.
Let me cut in very quickly. Two things I want to mention, and before we get on the on the topic of the documents. The first one, and I'm just seeing this now. This is just now released. The spokesman of Iran's Parliament National Security and Foreign Policy Committee, the option of withdrawing from the Non-Proliferation Treaty is now on the table. So maybe just more scene setting. or maybe truly just like, the slow creep towards war. As far as these documents, and I just want to, the reason I want to mention this is that the IAEA report from today really comes under the shadow of this release, and in particular, the documents that they released today, which revealed that Rafael Grossi, the head of the UN nuclear watchdog, has been fully coordinating with Israel and carrying out his directives. And this is, documents that Iran has released pointing towards this. This is an accusation, a very long-running accusation, right? That the IAEA is working to protect Israel. And the fact that Israel is not a signatory of the NPT and it hasn't had an IAEA inspection since 2013 doesn't seem to raise as many eyebrows as Iran, developing its own civilian nuclear program. But the treasure trove of documents, it has been essentially confirmed by Grossi himself a few days ago. And now Iran, as you said, these are like thousands upon thousands of documents that they say they got through these. Remember a few months ago when Israel was dismantling these Iranian spy networks. Every other week we were getting these headlines about a new Iranian spy network, about like a dozens of Israeli Jews who had been spying for Iran. Iran has made it kind of made it understood that the documents they got today are the result of this work that I guess was discovered, one would say, a few months ago. With that being said, what do we know about the documents? What is the most interesting thing that have caught your guys' eyes?
Well, to be honest, most of us just saw this today. There's a number of Hebrew language documents that we haven't translated yet. But there was an article in the Iranian press that sort of went into some detail, not so much about what each document was, but like the timeline of things and why the Iranian government suspects Rafael Grossi of gross misconduct by um, passing information to Iran's adversary, and basically the original source of most of the malicious charges against Iran's nuclear program that the IAEA always has to deal with.
Including cases that led to the assassination of scientists, of Iranian scientists.
Well, Iran is now saying that they are blaming IAEA's communications with the Israelis for Israel's ability to identify Iran's nuclear scientists. Yes. And when the IAEA, subsequent to the assassination a few years ago of like some of, I think, Iran's top nuclear scientists, Iran refused to give the names of other scientists because they charged at that time, I recall very vaguely, that no, we can't do that for the security of our scientists. So we know that Iran's been thinking about this for a while now. They're charging with these documents, this document cache, that they have evidence of it. One of the things that the Iranian media article pointed out that, and this is, I think, goes back a few years, that the IAEA had stated to Iran in an official letter to Iran, and it just says July 29th. It doesn't give the year, so it confused me a bit. Announcing to the Iranians they had no contacts with representatives of the Israeli government, period. Okay, these documents are clearly communications between various people at the IAEA and Israeli officials. Now, Israel has an ambassador, a delegate to the IAEA, and I think this is fairly recent because Israel's allowed the IAEA to inspect a very specific nuclear facility in Israel, okay, like a basic enrichment, got nothing, nothing to do with nuclear weapons, etc. And I think it's done so to provide a pretext for it to be in constant contact with the IAEA, and perhaps knowing that the Iranians have learned through their own source work that the IAEA and Israel are in direct contact. So the IAEA has denied this for some time, and now this initial tranche of documents shows that they are in contact with each other. So this is my favorite part, okay? Here is the point that blows my mind, okay? The IAEA, 2 days ago, before Iran released this tranche linking the IAEA and the director Rafael Grossi to Israel in these documents, the IAEA comes out on June 10th, Grossi himself, okay, And this is according to a confidential IAEA report on Iran seen by Reuters. Okay? Reuters reports that the IAEA has conclusive evidence of highly confidential documents belonging to the agency having been actively collected and analyzed by Iran. And they go on to say, Grossi, okay, the head of this watchdog, says, here, unfortunately, and this dates to a few years ago, we could determine with all clarity that the documents that belong to our agency were in the hands of Iranian authorities, which is bad. These are all quotes. We believe that an action like this is not compatible with the spirit of cooperation, Grossi said at a press conference on June 10th, 2 days ago. Meanwhile, the IAEA, a confidential IAEA report on Iran is shown to Reuters, a media agency. A confidential agency report on Iran is shown to a media agency. And Iran and anyone should think that there are not people at the IAEA who are showing this to the Americans, showing this to the French, to the British, to the Israelis whenever they want. A confidential report on Iran was shown to Reuters. That's the nature of the IAEA right now. That's how corrupt these international organizations are, because they're completely led by the Western neoliberal system, the rules-based order of what we says goes, disregard for international law, disregard for the integrity of international organizations. I'm more than convinced, because Reuters saw this confidential IAEA report on Iran. I am convinced that the Iranian tranche of documents is probably more than accurate. There's probably way more information linking the IAEA and Grossi to the Israelis, doing all kinds of things and leaking all kinds of information and revealing all kinds of secrets that they shouldn't have. This kind of thing makes me think, of course, how did the Israelis get the name of nuclear scientists to kill in Iran? IAEA.
I want to go over actually some of the revelations from these documents that Iranian journalist Mohammad Gaderi released a couple of days ago. And this is still unofficial, except for the documents on the IAEA that were released today. They say the documents include Tel Aviv's dangerous 4-year roadmap in the nuclear field, and information on their military and nuclear military industrial capabilities, bases, infrastructure. They also They also include information about bribes to well-known Arab figures aimed at advancing the Abraham Accords, as well as the complete profiles of 23 senior Israeli spies and the networks that they lead. And information on about 6 million Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram users. This is what Gaderi said a couple of days ago, that the documents include. This is why Iran, they were calling it like a resounding victory. They were calling it like an embarrassing defeat for the Israeli intelligence. The Iranian Ministry of Intelligence was saying this is going to take a very long time, as you said, Charmaine. This is a very, very large cache of documents. So I wonder if this has caused any concerns, in the Israeli halls of power, or you know, at this point, what can stop the Israeli war machine truly?
First, the moment that when Iran said that they have secret documents, it's not secret anymore. So Israel can if they know where the facilities are or the weapons or whatever, Israel now can move them and they know the extent of the breach. I think what happened, I think yesterday, is like response for what Iran did. These countries are pressuring each other, one by releasing like secret documents, and Israel is threatening, and the United States is threatening, because of course the United States is behind Israel. But of course we can't rule out that there might be a strike against Iran from the Israelis, because as the Israeli media they say, and they are saying it since the assassination of Sayyid Hassan, that now the axis of resistance is at its weakest, and if we want to bomb Iran, this is the time to bomb Iran. And they believe that Trump is their best ally since years and years. So they believe that if they bomb Iran, whatever happens, the United States and Trump will be behind them. So we should not rule out this option. Although we know that Iran is capable and Iran is strong, but I think that is the actions that the politicians took in the past year. Maybe people are now hesitating or thinking otherwise, but I think Iran is capable of resisting such an attack. And we'll see what will happen, because only yesterday, just because the United States said that they want to lower the number of the representative in the Persian Gulf, we saw that there was a surge in the prices of the oil, and there's still nobody even like fired a bullet. So of course everybody should make their own calculations on these countries, because such a war will affect the whole world, not only the region.
So I just want to say that the Iranian journalist who released the tweet thread yesterday, I think, or day before, 2 days ago, on what was in the or some of the stuff that was in the cache of hacked documents. I guess we can call them hacked documents, right? Um, Mohammad Ghadari is an Iranian journalist known to be very closely associated with Iran's National Security Council. In particular, there are many, many security bodies in Iran. He's close to the National Security Council. He was the founder of Noor News, which he ran for a number of years. I personally know that Mohammad Ghadari is very close to the National Security Council because during a trip to Iran some years ago, I was just literally needing so badly to talk to a top, maybe security related official, to try to put my mind around like the analysis I was making at the time. Is this correct thinking? Is that not, you know, and he got me in front of a very, very major official for 2 hours. I mean, I was blown away by that. And so I know Ghadari is very well connected. I did contact him when his tweet thread came out, and he got back to me and said, look, I said, I need verification. And he said, there's no way to actually verify because no Iranian media to date, and this is about 2 days ago, has published anything, any one of the documents yet. And so I said, how do you have your information? He said he has official sources that told him, you know, the sort of like parameters of some of the things that were in the trench. And again, I believe him because I know his connections. And also if he was just making stuff up, which he wouldn't, he's too senior a journalist in Iran, but if he was, he'd probably get trashed by his, you know, close friends and colleagues in the national security complex of Iran. You guys named some of the things in the tranche, but besides that, there are very, very, you know, kind of personal and individual things in the tranche, which include personal information on Netanyahu and his wife, Sarah Netanyahu, including their medical documents, testimonies of judges and doctors. You know, they have, both of them have been indicted on various charges of corruption, etc., bribery cases, and their threats on complainants to withdraw their testimony. Okay. Information obtained from Netanyahu's private office. This is all from Mohammad Ghadari, the Iranian journalist, including 4 terabyte hard drives and 1,720 sheets of secret documents, Mossad's secret archive, private information of Netanyahu's opposition leaders. And this is important, and I'll tell you why in a second. So private information of Netanyahu's opposition leaders in the Knesset, including hidden cameras in their bathrooms, bedrooms, and inside their homes, and information from hacking their mobile phones and personal computers, which were used in Netanyahu's, the prime minister's office, to blackmail his opponents. Now, just rewind back to 2 years ago in October 2023, okay, around the same time that Operation Al-Aqsa Flood was taking place, photos were released of former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, also an opponent of Netanyahu's, right, in compromising looking positions. I think he only had his underwear on in his bathroom. Okay, and obviously someone's taking the pictures. One assumes it's a woman because of the way he was posing and the way he was grinning at the camera. And those came out. So I suspect that this isn't like something the Iranians got now and suddenly, that they have been managed to infiltrate certain systems and pull out information and continue to access those systems for a time period. Because obviously the most interesting information for the Iranians would be information during this war with Gaza and, how Israel's moved around. It's already moved around its military doctrine a bit. This would be very, very crucial. And the Iranians are saying that they have information now that can really, really help them in the event of an Israeli attack. I think Israel's security and military stuff will have been rearranged to a large degree since October 7th. For sure, the Ehud Barak pictures, and we should put some up here because they're kind of like crazy, were from 2 years ago, which suggests to me, and that was attributed to an Iranian hack, okay? It suggests to me that there has been a continuous flow of information. The Iranians have decided to address it now because A, their sources have been compromised, or B, war is too close for them not to release these things.
And this year, Israel declared more than once that they caught like a spy network, Iranian spy network inside Israel.
They're claiming they caught 2 Israeli individuals, Jewish individuals, who they believe were transferring this information to Iran, but 2 people couldn't be getting stuff from cameras that Netanyahu's security people have been setting up in opposition offices. This is like Mossad files. This is like infrastructure files. This is their nuclear files. This is their banking and financial files. This is what I'm saying. Like, I think they've had this network of information gatherers and systems around for some time, and they've not all been caught.
There's a report from, I think, I don't remember which outlet it is. It's one of the Israeli outlets that they talk about there being in 2024 about 30 cases of Iranian spies being, either accused of being spies or actually, prosecuted for espionage. So, like I said a few minutes ago, this is something that has been happening for a while now. Just like, Iran just last week, I think they executed a guy who was accused of being a Mossad spy. Now, this is, something that was from 2020, someone who was caught in 2020. But this game of shadows, right, this cloak and dagger game between Israel and Iran has been ongoing for possibly the existence of both nations.
That's what you'd expect between adversaries, an ongoing intel war, of course, that's for sure. But I think, why would the Iranians have announced it now? I don't have a lot of confidence the Iranians will know what to do with this information, what journalists to give it to. I mean, if you remember when we got the WikiLeaks State Department cables, like a few major publications started doing stories on them right away, and then they kind of stopped. I mean, I think they got the pressure from their governments, like the New York Times, the Guardian, etc., big old legacy media cowards. But I think also you really needed time to go through the tranche of information, figure out what was important and when. And there's no way that the Iranians just got tens of thousands of documents, and on the day the IAEA did a really stupid, damning, very politicized vote, Iran suddenly had the document to show that Rafael Grossi, the head of the IAEA, was, canoodling with the Israelis on a regular basis for a couple of years, right? So I think they've had this tranche, but it doesn't mean it's an old tranche. It could have been an ongoing one. And Iran decided to reveal it now. Why? That's more the question for me than anything. Again, maybe its sources were compromised, or this was the time to show a card for leverage because it's getting very, very, very hot. The language, the threats, the movements, the actions. Maybe that's why too.
Maybe it's a negotiating tactic, right? Maybe this is like, the U.S. starts pulling out embassy staff and other officials, their families, to kind of, like we said, the push and pull that is happening right now. But as far as the documents go, this is, do we agree with the Iranian framing of it, of being, like this unprecedented victory, or I guess defeat, for the Israeli intelligence agencies? And because now one of the most important things is that they allegedly now know with the precise locations of Israel's secret nuclear facilities.
It's a small country. I don't think that's hard to find. If I drove around with a tourist hat on, I'd probably see a few sus things along the way. But at the same time, I think since October 7th, there must have been a lot of military and security redeployments. Obviously not the nuclear facilities, but potentially some protections for their nuclear facilities. Do you remember right at like on October 8th, the Americans sent US military personnel to stand guard at like Israel's main nuclear facility, which was so weird. Was it to protect an Israeli nuclear facility with weapons, which makes no sense, or was it to stop Israel from launching any nuclear missiles against anyone? We actually questioned it at the time.
And also, it tells me that when they reveal this information, or when they start to reveal more and more, this tells me that this is only for political pressure. Because if they want to take actions, they wouldn't say that. You know what I mean? And they gave the Israelis the time and space to relocate their secret weapons or whatever, or secret facilities, or where they store secret stuff. So I think this release of the documents is purely political, and only for pressuring in the negotiations. Because as we said the last time, yani, the Americans are threatening that the Israelis are threatening, and always the actions is coming from either Israel or the Americans against Iran. And as Sharmin said, this is a card to like counter these pressures.
But Esteban, you're a news editor, and you probably have the same feeling as me. But when the WikiLeaks State Department cables tranche came out, I was so excited. As a journalist, I was just like, in the database looking up all kinds of like obscure keywords or like very, very critical keywords to see what would come up. And then, of course, there were so many garbage documents alongside the good ones. But imagine getting your hands on a tranche of things. I mean, weapons import program from the US. The stuff we don't know what they're selling and what quantities. I'm like, how about what the Germans and the British and others are selling? I mean, they're lying. We know they're lying to their public.
Just to see how the Israelis talk to the like Western leaders. I will pay money just to read like
Yeah, but in
conversation.
documents, no. But the thing is, like videos.
No, they
and
said
files.
that this is included.
So, like a film of Netanyahu's debate with some Knesset members that was removed from all Israeli archives due to revelations in that discussion or argument. These are like lovely things, but the bribes to the Iranians are saying, or Qadari is saying, 4 famous Arab figures, okay, to advance the Abraham Peace Project. Who was paid? Guys, I mean, that's like, they say that the WikiLeaks cables kicked off the Arab Spring. Maybe, the Iran tranche will like kick off the purging of empire. I mean, please, I just don't think they're going to release it. They don't know what to do with this information. Listen, خواهش میکنم to Iranian officials watching this, which I doubt anyone is. Please, my name is Sharmeen Narwani. My email is available online. Please send us at the Cradle any cables in any language. We're happy to do the translation. We're happy to do the grunt work as long as we can verify what you're sending us. But I mean, this is journalist gold. Most media isn't reporting on this, by the way. They're just simply not reporting on it.
Well, it's because it comes from Iran, right? Like Iranian claims.
Correct.
But here's what I want to ask you guys, because I feel like, Karim, I think you kind of made mention about this earlier. If it had been Israel that got all of these documents, I feel like they would have just acted. Like when they killed Ismail Haniyeh, like when they killed Hassan Nasrallah, like when Ibrahim Raisi's helicopter crashed a bit suspiciously. That's just my perspective. Um, they don't really publicize what they're gonna do. Unlike the Iranians like the show, right? They like to put on a show. They like to tease. They like to say it's coming, it's gonna happen. Just wait for it. And that's like a thing of the resistance axis as a whole as well. The whole teasing something forward. And I know, Karim, you have very strong opinions about this.
Yeah, yeah. I often say that from Israel we see the actions, but from the Acts of Resistance we saw like many propaganda videos, and none of them were accomplished. Yeah, for instance, Hezbollah used to like release footages of Haifa and other facilities in Israel, full HD from their drones, and uh, one will expect, they are threatening to bomb these facilities, or at least some of the things that we saw on the released videos, but none of that happened, for instance. Unlike Israel, for instance, Israel, suddenly you see Israel assassinating or bombing or whatever without any anticipation or propaganda videos. So that's what I always say, and I think the acts of resistance, including Iran, they should there should be actions, and they should initiate, because what's happening in the region, or what's happened in the previous 2 years, is that Hezbollah, the Yemenis, even what happened previously in Syria and Iraq and Iran, all what's happened is like Iran or the acts of resistance acting to what Israel is doing. Yeah, and the action is always coming from Israel, and Israel is prepared because it did the action. And I think this hopefully this will change.
I don't agree with that in the sense that everyone always makes statements. I mean, today you had mentioned you'd seen a really, really good, someone had put together all the threats Netanyahu has made since like 2000, whatever. And maybe we should put it up on the screen, but all the threats he's made against Iran. So, of course, both sides do the threat, leverage, pressure game through words. I would argue that the announcement of the leak and then showing the first set of documents on a very critical day, to undermine the IAEA and show that it's highly politicized and that Rafael Grossi is basically, compromised, and is lying to the Iranians. And the IAEA is showing Reuters secret files and then complaining that Iran has accessed documents that are of actual national security interest to Iran is ridiculous. So I consider this an act, all right? And we are too groomed to think that behaviors and retaliations and reactions should be the kind we've observed from the West over and over again. They're very kinetic and they're very aggressive. This is not how the other side works. It's just not. But they haven't been losing. And what I mean is they've been gaining in stature and power and clout in the world by playing it their way. And obviously there comes a time where they're going to have to meet heinous aggression with heinous aggression. And, everyone's hoping to avoid it. Well, except for Netanyahu, right?
But Sharmin, don't you agree or think that the lack of action
This is an action.
yeah. No, at least the last 2 years led to like the assassination of Sayyid Hassan and the dissolve of Assad government, and Israel bombing facilities in Iran.
I would argue that we have seen more action from Iran in the last 2 years than we've ever seen in the resistance front, okay? Other than obviously Syria, et cetera, okay? This has been a decade or so that Iran has been very active because this is a country that does not like war, does not like to launch wars. It's not just the Islamic Republic. This has typically been Iranian behavior for centuries, So I think we've had a very active Iran, actually, okay, in Syria, in Iraq, and then in Palestine for the first time ever in its history. So you're just measuring it against the kinetic actions of the other side, which you can't measure because they're completely
I
different.
know.
They're different
I'm not talking
philosophies.
about only Iran. Yani, for instance, for me, I'm convinced.
No,
Or
I think the problems with the killing of, say, Hassan Nasrallah and other Hezbollah leaders and the assassinations of Palestinian leaders, etc., is because the resistance axis was genuinely surprised by the amount of intelligence infiltration, and I don't mean human infiltration, but technology, etc. You always argue that the West and its allies are so way ahead of the rest of the world in technology that we can't even imagine what they have. So
I can
why
argue
don't you?
more. For me, I think even Hezbollah or other resistance faction, they shouldn't even invest in technology because the West and Israel is so hard about far away from them. They should
So what, go
invest
back to sticks and stones, Kenny.
100%. Sharmeen.
Go back to sticks
Not
and
stick and
stones.
stones, as you say. I mean in communication, paper communication, without using technology, and as what happened 7 October. Yani you prepare your people for something and they don't know when it comes. You send it by paper when you want to do the operation, for instance. And you always, Sharmeen, talk about the war games that happened between Iran and the United States. And
These are U.S. Organized war games that they play among themselves, by the way. Not that Iran and the U.S.
yeah,
ever, yeah,
of course.
actually do joint exercises.
And the key factor, according to the journal, sorry, I forgot his name, that one that he was on the Iranian side, is the communication. Yani we know this. So I don't think
No, they in that war game, 2000 or 2002 Millennium Challenge, yeah. The colonel who quit the game went public with the information. The U.S. had on day one cut all of Iran's communications, but Iran had rallied in multiple ways. An example that he gave was that Iran had motorcycle carriers and went to using Morse code to communicate to the front lines, where then Iranians launched missiles and other projectiles, sinking basically 80% of the U.S. naval assets in the region. So I understand that, but don't forget the technology rush. I mean, it was Hezbollah in 2006 that shocked the Israelis. And we know from the Winograd Commission, the Israeli examination of its failures in the 2006 war, is that, if a decision was made by Nasrallah in a negotiation, immediately, that second on the ground, the troops had the communication and did what was ordered. And it was discovered that Hezbollah had spent years secretly constructing a fiber optics network. And this had shocked the Israelis. I think after a certain amount of years, Hezbollah got complacent. They kind of bought their own rhetoric. If you bomb our cities, we'll bomb yours. If you bomb our bridges, we'll bomb yours. If you hit our airport, we'll hit yours. They didn't actually deliver on that. And the Israelis instead spent years where we thought they were stupid and were seriously deterred, building up AI and infiltration technologies that was just identifying targets in nanoseconds and so on, the kind of stuff we're seeing now, like video game stuff, literally. Yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify my point, I used to say that we should not invest in technology regarding against Israel. We should use the firepower whenever Israel make a breach in what?
Iran
No, I'm
clearly
talking
used
about Hezbollah. I'm Lebanese.
no,
I'm
no,
talking
no.
about my country.
Iran and beneficiary will be Hezbollah, obviously. Iran obviously used technology to infiltrate defense ministry, financial sector, intelligence agencies, security agencies, the homes of Israeli officials, the private files of Netanyahu's office. That was a good use of technology.
Yeah, I know. I'm not against Iran.
The idea that the Iranians or the Axis is not taking action is wrong. They just think differently. They don't react the way
I fully understand, but I am talking about Hezbollah. And for instance, what I used to say is that for every intelligent operation, they should use the firepower because Israel it has the technology. We have the firepower. I think that was a good balance because let's not forget that it's not only the Israelis, they are not that smart. The point is that Israel and AIPAC and in the United States, they are there in every university in the world. And for instance, if even in Japan, student in Japan discovered something or invented something, instantly Israel will know what they did.
Okay, just by the way, we did an article, Esteban, you probably remember, it was about a year or so ago, where we believe it was Iranian hackers that had hacked 30,000 US universities and was printing out free Aaron Bushnell things from their copying machines. Let these guys play their own game. Speaking of going back to sticks and stones, Esteban, I know this is a favorite topic of yours, one you watch very closely, but some things happened in Gaza this week. Hamas killed 50 of the ISIS-linked, Israel-backed militias that were stealing aid. Okay, they just boom, sticks and stones. And also, it looks like the Israeli-U.S. NGO mercenary project to basically, dribble out aid to Gazans as they kill them is now is really having problems because and you can probably tell us more about this. One of their employees went public.
Exactly. One of their mercenaries went public yesterday in his interview with this outlet, Seteo. I'm sure we can put up, the report. In this interview, actually, it's not an interview. This is an article written by this U.S. mercenary who talks about his time at the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the U.S.-Israeli aid scheme, the death traps, where Palestinians, about 245 Palestinians have been killed in these 8 sites since the start of the operations, right? And we have seen the videos. I'm sure we can put the videos right now. What's the main takeaway from these, from what this mercenary says? He says, first of all, the Israelis are completely involved. Completely involved. They have offices at the sites, right? And then I think what I would rescue the most out of this, out of his account is this quote. He says, "Tanks fire all day long near these 8 sites. Snipers fire from what used to be a hospital. Bombs and bullets fly all day in one direction towards Palestinians, but never any fire from the opposite direction." So Palestinians who are going to these death traps are, on constant fire. He talks about
They're
that the Israeli
going for food. They're going for food and they're just playing video games with their lives.
And this is one of the most macabre revelations from this article is that the Israeli army imposes a curfew on, where the Palestinians are staying currently in the south of Gaza overnight, and then they get the food to be delivered to the GHF sites also overnight, essentially prompting Palestinians to start walking towards the sites, right? Luring them. They are being lured with the promise of food, and as they go, they just become target practice. They become in this horrific game in which he talks about we didn't get any training, we didn't get any, he says a cultural training, like we never told how to even act, how to deliver the aid, what is the process. We were just given guns and told if you feel threatened, defend yourself, right? And then we see the Israelis just massacring these Palestinians day in and day out. What legs does this alleged aid scheme even stand on anymore? Every day is a new horrific tale. Every day is a slew of horrific images. Every day is something else that tells us this is not about delivering humanitarian aid. This is about shooting fish in a barrel.
It's what we've repeated ad nauseum here at the Cradle. Like any U.S. Western construct is doomed to fail, from their aid pier, which got washed away numerous times. They spent like hundreds of millions of dollars on this thing.
It's worth of food. One day is worth.
Correct. To this. And last week we reported that the Boston Consulting Group basically cut its ties with this project because its employees objected to this heinous military operation, basically to what's the expression? Shoot fish in a barrel?
Yeah, to shoot fish in a barrel. Yeah, to shoot starving Palestinians by luring them with food.
Yeah. So, as you said, every day there's something that's being revealed. So last podcast, we revealed this. Who knows? There are multiple things happening every day. I personally think like people are probably really gratified that Israel's Palestinian foot soldiers, like dog collaborators, were like 50 of them were killed by Hamas. Because they're obviously helping the Israelis in this, and they're probably doing some of the shooting themselves, and they're
Exactly. According
protected
to
by
the
Israeli.
accounts, the shooting, the accounts from the Palestinians who go to these aid centers who survive, they say we're not just getting shot by the Israelis, we're getting shot by the gangs who are armed. I forget the name. I don't know if you guys
ISIS-linked
remember the
gangs
guy.
that Netanyahu openly admitted he is funding and arming. Okay, this isn't a secret. I mean, Israel supports ISIS, and America supports Al Qaeda in Syria. It's like cat's out of the bag, folks.
Even Smotrich released a statement 3 days ago saying that if I knew Netanyahu is doing this, I wouldn't accept it. Even
Smotrich,
yeah,
the
he's like-
finance
yeah,
minister? Oh,
yeah.
wow. When you anger Smotrich, oh my God.
There's just pure evil happening in Israel. Honestly, I just,
This is the essence of Western civilization, Sharmin. They use famine. They use famine since centuries against people.
weaponizing food.
They've done this in India
Weaponizing
and
food.
China, in the Arab world since years. It's
No, but we're watching it on video now. We're not reading in history books.
You know how every week there's a new poll from Israel that like somehow shows you how depraved this entire society has become. This week, June 10, had its 64% of Israelis see no need for more reporting on Gaza sufferings, and 64% say reports on local channels 12 and 13 were biased in favor of Palestinians, and they also believe there are no innocent people in the enclave. 64%.
Well, what can we say? At the end of the day, Israel has no right to exist, just like people realized that apartheid in South Africa had no right to exist. There's no fixing Israel. It's entirely premised on a political religious ideology called Zionism. That God gave people this land. It's theirs. There's no higher law than God, and therefore international law, none of that applies. These are just evil human beasts doing things we've never seen before, and there's zero apologies. There's zero embarrassment. They don't even care. When something heinous happens, there is an elected official who says, well done, we should do more of it. And Western countries are still trying to make excuses for them. I mean, truly, when Macron said that we've got to stop this Gaza war, it's ruining Western credibility. Your credibility is shot. All of you. Stammer, Macron, who's in charge in Germany? I can't even
Sanchez,
remember.
Merz.
Farfanugan,
good job, Esteban.
I remember names.
You know,
Before we wrap up, I just want to mention one thing quickly. I don't know if you guys read this week in the New York Times, there was a column by Thomas Friedman, genocide apologies number 2, maybe, after Piers Morgan. He says, he condemns, he says like Thomas Friedman, he talks about like this is causing a lot of backlash for Israel, etc., etc., etc. He cites a letter from like a reservist who is like asking that that the attacks in Gaza stop, and in this letter the reservist says that one Knesset member during a session even boasted that one of the achievements of this government and of this military has been that now we can kill 100 Palestinians per day and nobody bats an eye.
It's true. Please look at my pinned tweet. It is it posts a Cradle article called Israel's Not Crazy, It's Just Mad, MAD. And it's all about Israel's grooming and taming global audiences, friends and foes alike, to incrementally accept and expect Israeli bad behavior. And it is exactly what this is. First, they were killing one. First, they were bombing one hospital, making lots of excuses and explaining, ad nauseum about why. And, these are Hamas, this is whatever. And now they don't even bother. They have tamed and groomed us to accept and expect this kind of behavior. Israel isn't crazy. This is a strategy of the Zionist brain since day one of the state, actually even before that, because that's how they operated with the British mandate officials, bombing them, training them to accept and expect bad Zionist behavior. Of course, then the British called them Jewish terrorists, and they had what is it called? They had prescribed Jewish terrorist groups, the Stern Gang, the Irgun, out of which came 2 Israeli prime ministers. So it's just, this is how they've been from the beginning, from before the inception of the state. This is how they continue. And we're the idiots who just tolerate it. Of course, they're going to continue doing this because nobody stops them. But let's see if Iran does some magic this time around.
And on that note, we have come to the end of this week's episode. We want to thank you so much for joining us today. And again, remind you to leave a like, to share, to subscribe, to find us on X and on Telegram and on Rumble as well. Can never be too careful these days. And also, please ask you to check out our Patreon page where you can become a direct supporter of the Cradle and allow us to continue doing the work that we do here.
Our lights went off 3 times during this podcast, 1 time for 20 minutes. So please do contribute to the Cradle through Patreon.
For the Cradle News Roundup, my name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmin Narwani.